Imagine a skyscraper built at the absolute bottom of the Mariana Trench.
Right.
I want you to really, picture this for a second. We are talking about a tower of pure high-gloss glass and polished steel sitting in absolute pitch blackness, and it's attempting to endure roughly 16,000 pounds of pressure per square inch.
Which is just staggering to even conceptualize.
It really is. I mean, that is the equivalent of having an adult elephant standing on every single square inch of the building's surface.
Yeah.
So from an engineering standpoint, it is completely impossible. It is, it's structural suicide.
Absolutely.
But in the universe of the Obsidian mandate, it's not just possible, it's a Tuesday.
Yeah, and the wild thing is, it's not just a building either. It is a massive, sprawling declaration of war against the very concept of physics itself.
Oh, for sure.
When you place something that fragile in an environment that hostile, you aren't just building a city. You're actively daring the universe to crush you.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into an extraordinary set of design documents, scripts, storyboards, and creator notes detailing something called Volume 03 of the Obsidian Mandate.
Which is just a goldmine.
It really is. If you've been following our deep dives into this property, you know we love the world building, but the documents for Volume 03 are, they are an absolute masterclass.
Oh, without a doubt. The creators actually describe this specific arc in the notes as Southern Gothic Noir meets Cosmic Epic.
Which is such a crazy combination of genres.
It is, but it works so perfectly. It's a universe where ideologies don't just exist as, abstract thoughts in people's heads. They literally bleed into the landscape, the weather systems, the metallurgy, and the architecture itself.
Right. And today, our entire focus is going to be mapping the terminal friction between two completely irreconcilable forces in this universe.
Yes.
On one side of the oceanic trench, we have Poseidon's expansionist Abyssal Megacity. And on the other side, just gripping the seafloor, we have Susanoo's sacrificial storm-tossed Outpost.
It's just such a stark contrast. Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because to grasp the sheer scale of this, you have to picture the ultimate culture clash.
Right.
Imagine, a Silicon Valley tech billionaire trying to build an endless, shimmering glass mansion right on top of a deep-sea fault line.
I love that analogy.
Thanks. And they are going head-to-head with a multi-generational, rusted-out steel mill that's already bolted to the bedrock.
Yeah, exactly.
The billionaire has unlimited ambition. The steel mill has the undeniable reality of the Earth's crust. So it's not just two cities fighting. It's two fundamentally incompatible ways of existing in a drowning world.
And to understand how this collision works mechanically, we really have to start with the overarching thematic mandate that the creators, they just hammered it into every single page of these documents.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's a design philosophy that dictates literally everything. The lighting, the dialogue, the camera angles, the sound design.
Everything.
And the mandate is simply this. True power is found in the ability to withstand, not the ability to expand.
To withstand, not to expand.
Exactly.
That goes against almost every narrative we are taught in modern society, right?
Oh, completely.
We are conditioned to believe that power equals growth. It's the profit margin going up. It's the taller building. It's the expansion into new territories. But you're saying that in the abyssal frontier, which is the setting of this conflict growth, is actually a massive liability.
It is the ultimate liability. The creators call this foundational philosophy the anchor concept.
Okay.
And they define it very simply as endurance over volume. It is the governing law of the high-stakes geopolitical stalemate between these two sovereigns.
So let's break down that word volume for you listening at home, because in the context of these design documents, volume isn't about, turning up the sound on your TV.
Right.
And it isn't just about how much space a liquid takes up in a beaker. Volume is basically a stand-in for the expansionist ego.
Yes, exactly. It is the unchecked, unsustainable climb. And throughout the text, this ideology is completely embodied by Poseidon's city, which they constantly refer to as the Gilded Spire.
The Gilded Spire.
Yeah. So when the text talks about volume, it is critiquing an ideology where power attempts to justify itself simply by existing and taking up space.
Like it's entitled to the space.
Exactly. It is clinical authority. It is vertical dominance. And think about the psychology of endless growth in a closed ecosystem.
Right.
Volume is the assumption that if you build high enough, if you occupy enough visual and physical real estate, you somehow just become untouchable.
It's arrogance.
Complete arrogance. It is the belief that the environment, no matter how hostile, no matter how much pressure it exerts, will simply yield to your ambition.
It is hubris weaponized into architecture.
I like that.
I mean, volume is looking at the freezing, crushing deep ocean and saying, I'm going to build a fragile, beautiful glass tower here, not because it makes sense, but because my sheer willpower will force the ocean to accommodate me.
Yeah, and the creators specifically tie this to the concept of the divine CEO.
Oh, right, I saw that in the notes.
Yeah, one of the margin notes in the script actually describes Poseidon's reign as an IPO of the gods.
That's such a great phrase. An IPO of the gods?
Right. So volume is the belief that physics, gravity, and pressure are basically just subsidiaries of your corporate will.
Like you can just buy them out or manage them.
Exactly. It's a clinical kind of vanity.
Mm-hmm.
All glass, all ego, and absolute zero structural foundation.
But then you have the opposing philosophy, endurance.
Yes.
And endurance is just wildly unglamorous. It's brutal. It's the necessity of what the documents call the Obsidian route.
Where volume wants to climb into the sky, endurance wants to dig into the dirt.
Yeah.
In Susanoo's Outpost, authority is not some divine right handed down from a board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
Authority is a debt.
A debt.
Yes. And that debt is paid in blood, iron, and horizontal stability. Endurance does not care about looking impressive to the outside observer. It literally only cares about surviving the crushing weight of the world for one more day.
You know, there is this staggering piece of poetry in the design documents that really stuck with me when I was reading through them.
Oh, which one?
The text mentions that a spire is just a needle looking for a haystack. It's just a long way to fall. But a root is the iron that stays when the sky gets tired of holding up the sun.
Wow.
I mean, just the sheer weight of that imagery.
And that weight is very intentional. It heavily informs the specific aesthetic they mandated for the project, which they call the Southern Gothic Noir synthesis.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, typically, when we deal with gods, especially archetypes like Poseidon or Susanoo, who are very clearly standing in for Zeus and Odin figures here, we expect abstract mythology, right?
Oh, sure.
We expect pristine marble temples floating in the clouds, spotless white togas, gleaming weapons that never seem to dull.
Yeah, the classic Renaissance painting treatment, like everything is glowing, everyone is ridiculously ripped, and nobody ever sweats.
Exactly. But the mandate for Volume 03 explicitly outlaws that treatment. The instruction to the concept artist is written in all caps in the brief. It says, the divine is lived in, scarred, and heavy.
So no pristine marble.
None. The celestial is dragged through the mud, the humid shadows, the leaking steam pipes, and the oxidized iron of just a totally unforgiving reality. They stripped away the mythic abstraction entirely and replaced it with this brutal, industrial Gothic density.
Which honestly makes me wonder about the lived experience of this world. Like, for you listening, put yourself in this environment for a second.
Yeah, it's intense.
If you are surrounded by leaking pipes and rusted iron, it sounds miserable. Why does the philosophy of volume, the clean, shiny glass, why does it always feel so brittle and doomed in this specific narrative, while the heavy, miserable rust of endurance is treated with so much reverence?
That's a great question. It's because volume completely refuses to acknowledge the reality of the room it is standing in.
Right.
When you are in a high-pressure zone, and we can look at this literally as the bottom of the ocean or metaphorically as a high-stakes geopolitical crisis, the environment basically acts as an interrogative force.
Like it's questioning you.
Yes. The pressure is constantly asking you, do you actually have the right to exist here?
And volume's answer.
Volume tries to ignore the question. It builds its fragile glass spires, turns up the blinding lights, and just pretends the pressure doesn't exist. Endurance, on the other hand, answers the question by becoming exactly as heavy and unyielding as the pressure itself.
It's like trying to hold your breath underwater indefinitely because you just refuse to admit you aren't a fish.
Exactly.
I mean, eventually, physics wins. Endurance is the painful process of evolving gills, or, in this specific case, evolving massive reinforced iron plating.
Yeah, endurance is the complete acceptance of trauma as a structural requirement.
Oh, that's good. Trauma as a structural requirement.
The text even notes that in the Outpost, the storms have more seniority than the commanders.
Wow.
Which tells you absolutely everything you need to know about the hierarchy there. The environment is at the top of the food chain, and the survivors are simply the ones who figure out how to adapt to its weight without breaking.
Which brings us perfectly to the physical bodies and the cities of the two sovereigns who rule this drowning world. Because this abstract philosophy of volume versus endurance, it isn't just in the lore.
No, not at all.
It is literally built into Poseidon and Susanoo. So let's look at Poseidon first. The documents call him the architect of absolute volume.
Right, and he is the ultimate detached executive.
Yeah.
The text describes him as presiding over a digital afterlife, viewing architectural perfection as his divine right.
And his physical design.
His physical form totally reflects this. He is made of polished obsidian and white marble, and he's shimmering with these cyan energy platings. It's a very sharp, aggressive Art Deco aesthetic.
Very clean.
Very clean, very cold.
And his city, the Abyssal Megacity, which is also called Ma, or the Oceanic Spire, is a soaring, high-tech, vertical monolith.
Yes.
The visual cues the creators demanded for this place are highly specific. We are talking sheer glass faces, massive, monumental solar gates that basically blast blinding white light out into the pitch-black abyss. And most importantly, aggressive, cantilevered pressure holes.
Let's actually talk about the mechanics of a cantilever for a moment, because it completely explains the fatal flaw of his entire philosophy.
Let's do it.
A cantilever is a rigid structural element, like a beam or a platform, that is anchored at only one end.
Okay.
The other end extends out horizontally into empty space. So think of a diving board.
Right, where the board is bolted to the deck on one side, but the rest just hangs over the water.
Exactly. Frank Lloyd Wright's famous Falling Water House is a great real-world example of cantilevered architecture.
But Falling Water is built over a gentle, trickling creek in Pennsylvania. It isn't built under thousands of pounds of hydrostatic pressure.
Precisely the point. To make a cantilever work, the anchored side has to be incredibly deep and incredibly strong to support the weight of the suspended side.
Because of the leverage.
Yes. If the anchor is weak, the suspended platform basically acts as a giant lever, and it will just snap itself off at the base.
And Poseidon City is full of these.
Poseidon City is entirely made of these massive cantilevered structures reaching out into the deep ocean. It screams expansion. It is hydrodynamic hubris. He's reaching out over empty space in an environment that desperately wants to crush empty space.
So it basically has absolutely no structural integrity. It totally lacks physical anchorage.
None.
It's a skybound vanity project just sitting at the bottom of the ocean.
It is a needle balancing on its tip. It's
No.
surrounded by high-pressure currents, and it is surviving purely on the strength of its own arrogance. The documents state very clearly, the spire lacks physical anchorage to the horizon. It is a precarious intruder.
Now let's contrast that with Susanoo, the Iron Matriarch, the sovereign of the root.
Yeah, so where Poseidon is detached and flawless, Susanoo is this scarred survivor.
Very different vibe.
Completely. She is described in the art notes as a massive, low center of gravity mountain of reinforced iron and weathered hide.
Wow.
Her authority is not inherited or granted by a board. The text says her authority is a debt paid in iron.
And her armor tells a story, right?
It does. Her armor is etched with glowing amber runes, which serve as the literal, visual record of her personal sacrifices.
Wow.
Every rune is a cost she paid to keep her people alive.
And her city is the Outpost, Helheim, the Iron Necropolis. It is the polar opposite of the Gilded Spire.
Totally.
When you visualize this, do not picture a skyline. Picture massive subterranean furrows. We are talking about iron trenches that have been dug so deep, they are virtually indistinguishable from the Earth's crust.
Yeah.
It's a sprawling, industrial, Gothic, subterranean metropolis. It's humid. There are constant leaking pipes. The rusted machinery is so massive and so ancient that it's being actively colonized by thick, deep-sea purple moss.
And this is where we really need to think about the physics of deep-sea pressure again.
Right.
When you are dealing with incredible external weight, being flat and sprawling is a massive advantage.
Because there's less surface area resisting the crush.
Exactly. The Outpost's ultimate strength is that its power was forged in the trenches. It cannot fall over because it is already grounded in the reality of the seafloor's bone.
It's already at the bottom.
Right. It doesn't have a long way to fall. It is literally gripping the earth.
But, I want to push back on this for a second because here's where it gets really interesting to me.
Okay, go for it.
Reading through these design briefs, there is an incredibly obvious bias.
Sure.
The creators clearly favor the root over the spire. They love the rust and they hate the glass. But if you're an average person living in this world of crushing darkness and freezing deep-sea pressure, isn't there something genuinely magnificent about Poseidon's ambition?
This is a fair question.
He's building a literal beacon of light. He's trying to build a high-tech paradise with clean air, polished glass, and bright solar gates. Why is the narrative text so incredibly hostile to that kind of optimism? Because honestly, I feel like I'd rather live in the shiny tower than the rusted trench.
That is a completely natural reaction, and it actually gets to the absolute heart of the noir aspect of this Southern Gothic noir setting.
Okay, how so?
You have to remember the rules of the noir genre. In a noir universe, pure optimism is almost always a mask for corruption.
Oh, like a facade.
Exactly. Or, at best, it's an incredibly dangerous delusion. The text views Poseidon's optimism not as genuine hope, but as clinical vanity.
Right.
He isn't building a paradise for his people. He's building a monument to himself. And in this specific universe, refusing to acknowledge the harshness of the environment gets innocent people killed.
So it's not that they hate shiny things, it's that the shiny things are a lie. It's like
Yeah.
trying to balance a pencil on its tip on a moving train. It's not just that it might fall over. The geometry of the situation demands that it falls over, and anyone standing near it is going to get hurt.
Exactly. And the creators went to incredible lengths to weaponize color theory to make you, the viewer, feel this hostility on a totally subconscious level.
Oh, the color palettes. Let's talk about those.
They designed what they call the comparative palette matrix.
Mm.
Poseidon's domain is strictly limited to cyan, gold, high-gloss white, and indigo.
Which, I mean, those sound like beautiful, heroic colors.
They do, on paper. But you have to look at the lighting anchors the directors are forced to use. The mandate requires anamorphic flares and clinical glare.
Explain anamorphic flares for a second, because we see them in movies all the time, but people might not know the actual term for them.
Right, so anamorphic lenses are a type of camera lens that basically squeeze a wide image onto a standard frame of film. When bright lights hit these specific lenses, they create these very distinct horizontal streaks of light.
Oh, like the incredibly bright blue horizontal lens flares you see in a lot of modern sci-fi movies?
Exactly, like those big J.J. Abrams-style flares.
I know that.
They look very cool, but they also look deeply synthetic. They're literally an optical artifact. So when Poseidon City is lit with anamorphic flares and clinical glare, it looks like a sterile operating room or a police interrogator spotlight.
Right, it's not a warm light.
No, it is a cold, high-status ego. It looks clean, but it feels deeply alienating, artificial, and hostile in the context of an oceanic trench.
And then you flip to Susanoo's palette, which is frost, sea rust, which the notes describe as a heavily oxidized ochre deep purple, industrial gray, and amber.
Yes, and the lighting anchors here are completely antithetical to Poseidon. Ember, deep red, matte black. The shadows in Susanoo's Outpost aren't just an absence of light. The mandate explicitly describes the shadows as viscous.
Viscous, like thick, like oil.
Exactly. The shadows carry the physical, crushing weight of industrial waste. But within that heavy, oppressive darkness, you have the amber runes.
The amber bioluminescence.
Yes, amber provides a warm, flickering, sacrificial light. It is the color of a hearth fire.
So it's inviting?
It is. So subconsciously, the visual psychology is completely inverted. Poseidon's bright cyan and white, which should feel safe, actually feel blinding, detached, and cold.
And Susanoo's?
Susanoo's dark rust and purple, which should feel scary, feel heavy, sure, but the amber glow makes it feel human, grounded, and fiercely protective. The text hates Poseidon's optimism because it is a sterile lie.
Yeah.
It respects Susanoo's darkness because it contains the warmth of actual survival.
That is just brilliant visual psychology. It's not just a cool aesthetic, it's a subconscious psychological test for the audience.
Absolutely.
And this deep reliance on visual psychology leads us to the most massive constraint the creators put on this project. Because this philosophical void between the two cities isn't just in the lore, and it isn't just in the colors.
No.
It is physically weaponized in the constraints the creators mandated for the frame of the screen itself.
This is arguably the most fascinating technical aspect of the entire Obsidian mandate. The documents detail something called the 16.9 Widescreen Standard, or they also refer to it as the Cinematic Protocol.
Let's establish what that means for you listening. 16.9 is the standard widescreen aspect ratio. It's the shape of your modern living room TV. It's the shape of your laptop screen. It's the standard cinematic formatting for most video content. It is simply a rectangle that is significantly wider than it is tall. But in Volume 03, the creators didn't just choose 16.9 because it's standard. They use it as an active, aggressive storytelling tool.
Yes, the primary purpose of this protocol is to capture what the directors call epic distance and horizon line conflict.
And the rules outlined for the storyboard artists and directors are incredibly rigidly strict here. First, there is the rule of thirds mandate. Poseidon and Susanoo must always, without exception, be anchored at opposite horizontal poles of the frame.
Exactly. If Poseidon is positioned on the far left edge of the screen, Susanoo must be on the far right edge.
No cheating.
No cheating. The vast center of the screen is left completely empty.
The point of this is to emphasize the massive philosophical void between them. It's a visual tug of war. They are literally as far apart as the physical universe of the screen will allow them to be.
Right.
But the real genius here, the thing that totally blew my mind when I read it, is what the documents call the vertical paradox.
Oh, the vertical paradox is an absolute masterclass in visual manipulation. Think about the basic geometry of a 16.9 frame.
Okay.
By definition, it prioritizes the horizontal plane. Historically, widescreen formats like CinemaScope were invented to capture sprawling Western landscapes, massive armies lined up on a horizon, the sweeping width of a desert.
Right, you want to show how wide the world is.
Exactly. The format is built for horizontality.
So if the frame is built to showcase flat, wide things, what happens when you shove a vertical monolith, like Poseidon's towering spire, into a frame that is desperately trying to stretch horizontally?
It exposes what the design documents call the vanity of verticality. By maximizing the horizontal expanse of a 16.9 frame, any purely vertical object is instantly rendered unstable.
Think about this in the context of the last epic blockbuster movie you watched. Usually a tall tower is shot to look incredibly imposing, right? The camera tilts up from the bottom, the building fills the entire frame top to bottom, and it feels dominant and powerful. But here, they are purposefully using the extreme unnatural width of your TV screen to make the tallest, most advanced building in the world look like a fragile little toothpick waiting to snap.
It becomes a vertical object trapped in a horizontal world. It looks like a precarious intruder. And the creators double down on this psychological trick with their rules for negative space.
Right, the 80% rule.
Yes, the documents mandate that in the early movements of the story, directors must use 80% indigo or cyan negative space around the spire.
Let me stop you there, because 80% is a staggering amount of empty screen.
It is massive.
That means the spire itself, this massive supposed symbol of ultimate power, occupies barely any visual real estate. It's just this incredibly thin needle piercing the middle of the frame, surrounded by an ocean of heavy, crushing, empty water.
Yeah.
It makes the spire look incredibly lonely and frail, despite how tall it supposedly is. It visually confirms, without a single word of dialogue, that Poseidon has no foundation.
And they contrast this intensely with the mandated shot types for both cities. Let's look at the camera rules for Poseidon first.
Okay.
The mandate dictates that the camera must almost always be placed in an extreme low-angle shot.
Now, traditionally, in basic film school theory, a low angle makes a subject look powerful. You put the camera on the ground, looking up at the superhero, and they look like a god.
True, but context is everything here. In the context of the vertical paradox, in that 80% negative space, placing the camera on the ground and looking up at this incredibly thin, unsupported needle that is straining against the very top edge of the widescreen frame.
It changes everything.
It doesn't look powerful at all. It looks like it is straining. The low angle actually emphasizes the precarious height and the imminent instability of the structure. It makes a viewer feel like the building is about to tip over directly onto the camera lens.
It creates anxiety.
Exactly. It creates total anxiety.
Yes, but then, the moment the scene cuts to Susanoo's outpost, the mandated shot type completely inverts. No more low angles, no more tilting up. For the outpost, the mandate strictly requires deep focus, wide shots.
So deep focus is a cinematic technique where everything from the immediate foreground to the distant background is in sharp, crisp clarity. There is no blur.
Everything is in focus.
Right. And a wide shot in a 16.9 frame means you are emphasizing lateral density. When you look at the outpost, it fills the entire bottom half of the screen, stretching endlessly from the left edge to the right edge.
It is sprawling. It just hugs the ground.
It visually confirms the philosophy of endurance. The camera doesn't ever need to look up because the power of the outpost isn't in its height. The power is in its inescapable scale and its foundation.
Yeah.
The root fills the frame laterally, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is permanently grafted to the Earth's crust. It cannot be tipped over because it is already perfectly flat.
It's making the viewer feel the core theme in their gut without ever having to explain the mechanics of it out loud. You look at the spire surrounded by 80% empty water, and you feel anxious and claustrophobic. You look at the outpost filling the bottom of the screen, and you feel the heavy, secure weight of reality.
It is visual psychology executed flawlessly through rigid compositional rules.
It really is.
And this obsession with restriction brings us to the dialogue. Because just as the visual space is locked down by these architectural and framing rules, the verbal space, like the actual script, is governed by an incredibly brutal law of minimalism.
This is where the world building crosses over from visual design into pure narrative constraint. We have to talk about the 10-word dialogue law.
Yeah, this is wild.
The operational maxim of the entire script for Volume 03 is this: no single line of dialogue spoken by any character may exceed 10 words.
10 words. That is the absolute maximum limit.
It's like being forced to write a sweeping cosmic epic using only Twitter character limits, but with apocalyptic life or death stakes. The mandate explicitly tells the writers that the dialogue must be minimalist and weary. The instruction is literally, let silence and subtext carry the weight.
And writing under that kind of intense constraint forces a writer to physically change how they construct a narrative.
Oh, I bet.
You can't rely on exposition. You can't have a villain explain their evil plan in a monologue. You have to rely on what Hemingway called the iceberg theory.
The iceberg theory. Okay, explain that.
It's the idea that the words spoken are just the 10% of the iceberg visible above the water, while the true meaning, the 90% of the massive emotional weight, is completely hidden beneath the surface in the subtext.
And when you apply that 10-word limit to these two specific sovereigns, it reveals the core of their characters in profoundly different ways. Let's look at how Poseidon uses his 10 words. In the text, he says things like, gravity is a choice I have not yet made. That's 9 words.
Or this directive, the abyss obeys the volume of my will. 8 words.
Or my personal favorite, more is the only truth of the deep. 8 words.
Notice how Poseidon utilizes his constraint. His brevity is not born out of necessity or survival. It is born out of absolute arrogance and clinical detachment.
Right.
He speaks entirely in executive summaries. He issues corporate directives. He doesn't ever feel the need to explain himself or elaborate because he genuinely believes his power is self-evident to the universe.
It's the ultimate ego trip. It's like he's saying, I am so infinitely powerful and you're so beneath me that I only need 8 words to define your reality.
Exactly. It is the verbal equivalent of those anamorphic lens flares we talked about. It is sharp, bright, blinding, and cutting. It highlights his vanity. He wastes absolutely no breath on empathy, understanding, or connection.
But then you look at Susanoo's dialogue, and she's constrained by that exact same 10-word rule, yet her lines feel entirely different. Listen to the texture of her lines from the text. The weight is the teacher. 5 words.
Every rivet is paid for in blood. 7 words.
The storm has no floor, only the root holds. 9 words.
For Susanoo, the 10-word limit reflects the physical reality of a sovereign who views breath and words as highly expensive commodities.
Like actual resources.
Yes. In a high-pressure, drowning environment where oxygen is literal survival, you do not waste air on long, flowery speeches. Every syllable costs something. Her short bursts of dialogue are heavy, grounded, ancestral maxims of survival.
It's incredible how restricting the word count actually expands the depth of the world. Like when Susanoo says, pressure teaches what the surface forgets, which is only 6 words. She isn't just dropping a cool action movie one-liner.
No, not at all.
If you analyze the subtext, she is summarizing centuries of ancestral trauma, the daily reality of industrial survival, and the fundamental fatal flaw of her enemy. She manages to say more in 6 words than most characters say in a 3-page Shakespearean monologue.
Because the words are so incredibly sparse, the silence that surrounds them becomes deafening. The subtext has to do all the heavy lifting. Susanoo speaks like someone who is bone-tired, who has personally paid the toll for every inch of ground she holds, and who only opens her mouth when it is absolutely necessary for survival.
It perfectly encapsulates the ethos of the scarred winner.
It really does.
So, if we look at the board, all the pieces are in place. We have the core philosophy of endurance versus volume. We have the architectural avatars of the heavily rusted, sprawling outpost and the precarious, skybound glass spire. We have the visual tension of the 16.9 widescreen vertical paradox. And we have the weary minimalism of the 10-word dialogue law.
Yep.
All of these incredibly disciplined elements are on a collision course.
And the creators structured that inevitable collision perfectly. They laid it out across a highly disciplined 4-movement narrative arc. The storyboards and scripts outline exactly how the fall of volume plays out, beat by beat.
Let's walk through this collision, because it doesn't happen all at once, right? It builds. What happens in movement?
Movement and I is titled The Vanity of Volume. This covers beats 1 through 10 of the master storyboard. We open entirely on Poseidon's abyssal Megacity. The lighting is exactly what we discussed. High-key, blinding light. cyan, gold, and white.
The clinical glare.
Yes, a clinical, sterile brilliance. The extreme wide shot shows the massive spire straining against the top and bottom edges of the widescreen frame.
Even though we are looking at this massive towering structure, the framing makes it feel incredibly claustrophobic. It feels like the building is trapped in a box that is just too small for it.
And the sound design is crucial in this first movement. Underneath the dialogue, there is a low, rhythmic hum of a pressurized vacuum. It sounds highly artificial, like an overworked machine desperately trying to hold back the weight of the ocean.
And within this vibrating claustrophobic frame, Poseidon is pacing back and forth on a horizontal silver ledge. There is absolutely no support beneath him, just a cantilever extending over the abyss. And he declares, with maximum hubris, "I am the height of existence."
The visual tension in this movement is overwhelming. Because of the 80% negative space and the unnatural widescreen framing, the spire looks cramped and vibrating with structural instability. The flickering gold light feels less like a beacon and more like a dying filament in a light bulb.
Wow, yeah.
You're looking at a structure that is at war with its own environment, and you can feel that the environment is winning.
So if that is the tension building in the spire, what is happening down in the trench?
That brings us to movement 2. The reality of the route. Beats 11 through 20. We smash cut from the blinding, precarious, vibrating heights of the spire straight down into the heavy, muted lateral spread of the outpost.
The sensory shift is violent. The brilliant cyan and gold are totally gone. Suddenly, the lighting is low-key, viscous, and highly textural. Sea rust, deep purple, industrial gray.
Right.
And the sound design shifts completely. The clean, high-tech hum of the vacuum is replaced by this industrial ASMR. You hear wet steel cables slapping against each other, oxidized iron gears grinding, high-pressure steam violently hissing from valves.
And the shadows are thick and matte. Visually, the outpost fills the entire width of the frame from edge to edge. It is deeply grounded and completely unmoving. Susanoo's walking through this massive footprint, running her hand along rusted gears that are glowing with those warm amber runes, and she notes, "Endurance is the machine that never stops."
Movement 2 essentially establishes that while the spire is struggling just to hold its own weight up in the empty water, the outpost is already carrying the weight of the entire world, and it isn't buckling. The pressure is just making it stronger.
Then the tension breaks. We hit the climax. Movement 3, the horizon collision. Beats 21 through 25. This is where the cinematic friction reaches its absolute peak.
The rule of thirds is invoked perfectly here. The camera pulls way back. Poseidon is anchored on the far left edge of the screen. Susanoo is anchored on the far right edge. And the two environments literally crash into each other in the center. The text describes it as a violent chiaroscuro friction. Let's define chiaroscuro real quick.
Chiaroscuro is an art history term, heavily associated with painters like Caravaggio or Rembrandt. It refers to the dramatic, high-contrast interplay between extreme light and extreme dark.
Right.
It's usually used to create a sense of three-dimensional volume or intense psychological drama.
Right.
But here, the creators are using it literally. The light and the dark aren't just shading, they're physical, colliding forces.
The palettes actually physically grind together at the horizon line. The clinical cyan and gold of the spire attempt to aggressively wash over the deep purple and sea rust of the outpost.
Yeah.
The sound design is chaos. It is filled with deafening electrical snaps and earth-shaking, bass-heavy booms. Poseidon screams across the void. Absolute volume owns the entire sky. And Susanoo replies, "From the dirt, the earth owns the final breath."
It is an ideological war fought with light, shadow, and sound. The spire is attempting to impose its sheer volume, its blinding light, onto the outpost. But the outpost is the earth. It won't budge.
And because the outpost won't budge, all of that kinetic energy, all of that pressure, has nowhere to go but backward. It reflects back onto the spire, which triggers movement 4, the collapse of volume. Beats 26 through 30.
The inevitable mathematical failure. The cantilevered pressure hulls of the Megacity, which we established, lack any grounded, deep foundation. Finally, buckle under the crushing, accumulated weight of the deep ocean and their own reflected ambition.
The hydrodynamic steel shatters. The blinding cyan and gold lights blow out. The spire doesn't just fall over, it literally folds into itself, collapsing inward, and is swallowed by the vacuum of the negative space.
Yeah.
Poseidon's final 10-word realization before the collapse is, the vacuum. Sorry, no ellipses. The vacuum consumes the light.
It is a total structural and ideological wipeout.
I want to pause the action right here and ask you about the catalyst for this collapse. Because looking at the mechanics of this scene, what does this all mean in the grand scheme of this universe? Why does the collision happen in this specific moment? Did Poseidon actively overreach and launch an attack, or is this just the inevitable physics of this universe demanding that the Spire finally pay its structural debt?
If we look closely at the creator notes in the archives, it is absolutely the latter. Poseidon didn't necessarily launch a missile or declare a hot war. His very existence, his insistence on expanding in a space that demanded contraction, was the overreach.
Ah,
The script notes state that the collapse happens when, quote, the pressure of existence forces the Megacity to seek support it does not possess.
the pressure of existence itself, just the act of trying to be a tall tower in a deep trench.
Yes, it is an ideological collapse manifesting as a physical one. Volume was always a ghost story for the sky. It was a fraud from day one. It only existed as long as the environment passively allowed it to exist.
Right.
The moment it encountered a true, immovable horizon Susanoo's route, the illusion shattered. The spire didn't just fall down. The collision exposed the fact that the spire had never truly stood in the first place. It was always falling, it just finally hit the ground.
That is a staggering concept. The vanity of volume crushed under the weight of its own lack of foundation. Which brings us to the resolution of the Obsidian mandate, the outro.
The final beats of the storyboard establish what the creators call the scarred winner principle.
Walk us through that final frame because the imagery described in the documents is haunting.
The final shot is an extreme wide shot, locked rigidly in that 16.9 widescreen ratio. The gilded spire is completely gone. There is no cyan, no white light anywhere in the frame. The image is reduced to a flat, infinite horizontal line composed entirely of frost, industrial gray, and sea rust.
The horizon is all that's left. The verticality has been completely erased.
Susanoo stands alone in the dead center of the frame, occupying the space where the collision just happened. Her iron armor is etched with a series of entirely new amber runes.
More scars.
Yes. This is the visual record of the personal, physical cost she just paid to survive the collapse of the spire. The root remains completely immovable because it is part of the Earth's bone.
The closing monologue of the script, meant to be read over this silent, rusted landscape, says it all. You see it all the time. A man builds a city so deep he forgets the floor it sits on. He calls it sovereignty. I call it a long way to fall. You can't topple what's already part of the Earth's bone.
The ultimate brutal lesson of the Obsidian Mandate is that endurance is the only victory that matters. The gold eventually washes away. The glass inevitably shatters. The ego always collapses. Only the scarred iron remains.
For you listening, it's impossible not to think about how that applies outside of this fictional abyssal frontier.
Oh, absolutely.
How often do we prioritize rapid expansion, quick growth, and shiny, precarious volume in our own lives, our careers, our tech startups, our societies? How often do we chase the cantilevered glass tower while completely ignoring the heavy, unglamorous, rusted work of building a foundation?
Too often.
The Obsidian Mandate is a stark, beautifully designed warning that gravity and pressure always eventually collect their debts. You cannot outclimb a lack of foundation.
It's a brilliant, incredibly cohesive piece of world building. Every single rule, from the geometry of the aspect ratio to the psychology of the color palette to the physical constraints of the 10-word dialogue limit, it all serves to mechanically reinforce that one profound truth.
It really is a masterpiece of design. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I know we need to look at the flip side of this equation.
Right.
We've talked a lot about the nobility of the root and the necessity of endurance. We've praised Susanoo for surviving. But is there a darker side to Susanoo's victory?
This raises an important question, and it's the exact question the creators want you to ponder long after we sign off today.
Yeah.
The text clearly positions endurance as the righteous, necessary path over the vanity of volume. But look closely at that final image. Susanoo, standing utterly alone on an infinite frozen rusted horizon, bearing new painful scars. If true survival in an unforgiving world requires us to become like the heavy, brutalist, rusted reed, we have to ask ourselves what we're actually saving. Are we enduring for the sake of building a better, warmer future? Or, in our desperate singular obsession with surviving the crushing pressure, are we simply becoming indistinguishable from the harsh, rusted environment that is constantly trying to crush us?